So we've got a few folks who were unavoidably detained elsewhere this morning. I understand, that's fine, we forgive you. So we've looked at Lucifer's rebellion in heaven, and we looked at Christ's response in his incarnation. And we have seen interesting things there. We're going to have to go quickly, because I'm actually kind of trying to do two presentations in one right now. We're going to go quickly through this. But in the overview, here's what it boils down to. Here's my major premise. In the life of Dr. Kellogg, we have been given a unique illustration. In what I would call the converted phase of his life, he was, for specific reasons, in certain ways at least, the best representative of Christ on earth at that time. And I can pretty much document it. Not in every way, perhaps. Oops, this is not turned on, maybe. There we go. How about that? Is that better?
Yeah. And could you explain the Dr. Kellogg is for those who don't know?
Okay, sure. So, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg was a sort of a second-generation Adventist. His parents were Adventist. He grew up in the Battle Creek area. Was a bright young man, sharp. Intended to be a school teacher. That was his goal. He liked the idea of education and helping people learn and grow and things like that. He did not want to do anything to do with medicine because he hated the sight of blood. He had a tendency to faint, and didn't think that was a good career choice for him. But the Whites, James and Ella White, sent him and 4 others off to a medical college. In those days, you could take a 6-month course and graduate with an MD. Wow. It was a lot easier. I think there's something to be said for that. But Willie White and Edson White both went along on the same adventure, and they came back and their father said to them basically, if you guys are going to pursue medicine, that's a noble thing, but none of this half-baked stuff. If you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an intelligent doctor, you're going to master your field. So take your little diplomas and roll them up and put them in your sock drawer, otherwise. And so that's probably what they did. What they ended up doing, they never used their diplomas and never claimed to be MDs. By that time, though, Dr. Kellogg was hooked. And so he went off and he did some further study at the University of Michigan and then Bellevue Medical Center in New York City. And he took over the Western Health Reform Institute, is what it was named at the time, in 1876. And one of the first things he did was he changed the name without bothering to consult with the board of directors. He said, people are tired of being reformed. We're going to call it the Battle Creek Sanitarium, which was a brand new word. Sanatorium was a standard word in the language, but sanitarium was new. And he said it will come to be defined as a place where people recover and learn to retain their health. So Dr. Kellogg fills a special role. And let me just give you some statements along this line. First, I should draw your attention to the subtitle there, So Close, So Far. Because Dr. Kellogg filled a dual role in the development of all this. So we'll come to that in time. Dr. Kellogg has done a work that no man I know of among us has had qualifications to do. Okay? He's a little special. How special? Notice this statement. This is pretty bizarre in a variety of ways. One of the things that's most striking about this next one is actually from a letter to Dr. Kellogg himself. You have to understand that in many times, Ellen White was very cautious not to encourage pride, in anyone, right? So if I got a letter from Ellen White would probably be straightening me out because I needed to be straightened out, and telling me to be kind and patient with my brothers who may make a mistake. But when they get a letter, it would be to them, straightening them out and telling them to be kind and patient with me because I make mistakes. That's the way it comes with. But this is remarkable, not for just what it says, but that she actually wrote it to Dr. Kellogg himself. My dear brother, as I've before written to you, I know that the Lord has placed you in a very responsible position, standing as you do as the greatest physician in our world. Okay. That's a pretty good recommendation. God says of Dr. Kellogg, he is my physician. Respect him and sustain him. Dr. Kellogg, with earnest, untiring energy, has testified by his works that he believes the Word of God, that he is not content to be merely a theoretical believer. He has put his belief into works. He has faith and works combined. His work in the medical missionary line has had the appearance of being disproportionately large. But he has seen the feeble efforts made by the churches whose practice has not been proportionate to the light, and he has undertaken to educate his students to do service for the Lord. In this, he has only tried to walk in the light. He has been doing the very work the Lord has specified should be done. Well, let's see. I'm going to have to skip a few things along the way here. These are, let me look at the last one. You can read this if you're quick. You need to practice health reform just as conscientiously as Dr. Kellogg. So basically, Ellen White is supporting the guy and encouraging people to support him and carry on. This is an important statement, so I'm going to have to read it all. It's too bad, it's a long one. If Dr. Kellogg will trust himself wholly with God, he, capital H, will give him, little h, tact and perception and skill as a practitioner that has seldom been excelled. Angels of God will stand by his side when human life is in peril, and wisdom from above will be given him. God designs that Dr. Kellogg shall still advance. He has only begun to climb the ladder. The Lord will give him grace that he is now ignorant of, and he will see as he has never seen before. He will realize that there is to be an intelligent discarding of all drugs. Skill and knowledge is to be given him, which he is in no case to keep to himself. He is to educate, educate, educate. Now, depending on your perspective on life in general and medical stuff in particular, you may have caught that reference to no drugs. To me, this is an important statement because there are statements from Ellen White that come across very strongly, like all drugs are to be discarded. End of game. And then there are statements that come across more along the lines of, you need to do the best you can. And if the best is a drug at the moment, you probably ought to do that. I had an acquaintance when I was teaching in Oklahoma. Her cousin was the little boy who died of malaria in Africa. And the missionary parents conscientiously avoided quinine because Ellen White said don't use drugs. And they came back to the States and they had occasion to meet Ellen White. And they asked her, and they said, Sister White, this is what happened. Just for our own sake of mind, can you tell us, did we make a mistake? And she said, the Lord loves you. The Lord loves your son. But we should do the best we can. And if the best you have was quinine, I would have encouraged you to use it. Now, that goes along with this statement. He will realize there's to be an intelligent discarding of all drugs. When is it intelligent to discard a drug?
Something better.
When you have something better. Yeah. If you have another equal or superior treatment. The point is, this was a learning process. Kellogg was just beginning to climb the ladder. He was to report back to the rest of us what he figured out. It never happened entirely. So consequently, there are disease conditions that we don't have good natural remedies for. And so I would encourage you, if you find yourself in that situation, don't die. No, don't die. go ahead. You know, if you have to take the antibiotic, take the antibiotic. If you can avoid it, avoid it. They're terrible on you. You know, they wreak havoc on your microbiota and your intestines. You know, all that. Okay. There are better options for many things, but not all. We don't have all the answers that we would have and should have had if Kellogg had persevered. And to me, that provides a very nice, rational way to harmonize these strong statements against drugs with the statements that seem to allow, you know, what's the deal? Are you against them or are you not? What's going on here? She's against them as we have something better. Does that make sense? To me, that makes sense. Anyhow, let's go on. So Dr. Kellogg was an important guy. A really important thing happened. In 1888, there was a general conference session in the city of Minneapolis. You might have heard of the general conference of 1888. This is for righteousness by faith, Jones, Wagner, Smith, Butler, Ten Horns, Law and Galatians, righteousness by faith, that whole thing, right? If you're familiar with that, this was the setting. After that meeting, Dr. Kellogg was a converted man, and we all knew it. We could see the converting power of God working in his heart and life. Now this to me, I admittedly have got a weird level of curiosity, I grant that. But the moment I read this, I say, how can you tell? What was different? Did he stop going to the bar on Friday nights? Is that how you knew that he was converted now? Okay. No, he did not stop going to the bar on Friday nights. He never had gone to the bar on Friday nights. Okay, so let me start in rumors, okay? He never, that's like the old, have you stopped beating your wife yet question, you know? No, I haven't stopped. No, yes, I stopped. Well, you did. No, see, it's embarrassing either way. So, he hadn't been doing it, but there was something different. What was different? I mean, it was obvious different, right? Everybody knew it. We could see it. This is 1888. He'd been the medical director of the sanitarium for 12 years. He was a pillar of the church. He was probably an elder or something. I don't know. What was different? It's highly technical, as near as I can figure it out. The difference is that after he was converted, he started being nice to people.
Amen.
and trust me, it's harder than it sounds sometimes. There are some people that are just desperately crying out to have their head remodeled by Peter Ford, you know? And you need to be nice to them anyhow, you know? You really do. That, it turns out, is the natural result of righteousness by faith. When the believer is justified because of the merit of Christ, he is not free to work unrighteousness. Faith works by love and purifies the soul. Faith buds and blossoms and bears a harvest of precious fruit. Where faith is, good works appear. The sick are visited, the poor are cared for, the fatherless and the widows are not neglected, the naked are clothed, the destitute are fed. That's what comes from righteousness by faith. His service for others. And Dr. Kellogg started doing that. One more statement. Faith in Jesus Christ as our personal Savior, righteousness by faith, right? 1888, that whole thing. The one who pardons our sins and transgressions, the one who is able to keep us from sin and lead us in his footsteps, is set forth in the 58th chapter of Isaiah. Here are presented the fruits of a faith that works by love and purifies the soul from selfishness. Faith and works are here combined. Thy righteousness shall go before thee. That's quoting Isaiah 58. What does this mean? It means Christ is our righteousness. Isaiah 58, in case the reference doesn't ring a bell, is like the great medical missionary chapter. Is not this the fast that I've chosen? Loose the bands of wickedness, undo the heavy burdens, let the oppressed go free, break every yoke, deal your bread to the hungry, bring the poor, cast out to your house. That whole chapter. That is what happens from righteousness by faith.
Amen.
So, hide that for a moment, back that up. So Dr. Kellogg is converted in 1888 and decides he's going to be nice to people. Dr. Kellogg was not a normal mortal person like you and me. At least like me. I mean, maybe you're super mortal like he is, but anything Kellogg did, he did on a grand scale. So, me, I want to be nice to people, I'll do some nice thing. Kellogg wants to be nice to people. He says, let's start an orphanage. Okay. Let's do something big. Okay. So he got in touch with Ellen White. They happened to be in Doski, Michigan. I don't know how to pronounce that, something like that. in the summer of 1890. And so he talked to Ellen White. He says, "Sister White, I've been doing some research, and I believe there are a lot of Adventist orphans that are not being cared for. Should we start an orphanage in Battle Creek?" She later wrote this up, an account of her response to it, and it shows up in, I don't know, maybe volume 4, I think, probably something like that, of Testaments. The first sentence, maybe it's 2 sentences, is the classic response to the question, should we start an orphanage? It says, to the physicians at the Battle Creek Sanitarium, "I had some conversation recently with your physician-in-chief in regard to the wisdom of starting an orphanage in Battle Creek. I told him that this was an excellent idea. We were years behind in this important line of work." There are 45 words in 2 sentences, I think it is, saying, start this orphanage. Coincidentally, that particular letter has a total of 2,345 words, which means that there are 2,300 more that come after the first 45. Okay, those are the first 45 words, and there's 2,300 more. And interestingly enough, and I was really, really slow to realize this, those 2,000 words, 2,300 words after that lay out all the problems that came in Battle Creek in the next couple of decades. Too many buildings, too big of buildings, too much concentration, too much greed, too much this. Everything is pretty much laid out in that one letter. And so, you'd think I quit doing that, but that takes intelligence, and so it doesn't happen, I guess. Nonetheless, at the General Conference session of 1891, in January, maybe February, I forget exactly, of 1891, Dr. Kellogg made a formal motion, Mr. Chairman, I move that we start an orphanage, right? Okay. So I want to read some things that he said in his introduction to this. He's kind of laying the groundwork for this motion he's going to make. So I've given a good deal of thought and study to this subject. My wife and I have given considerable attention to this work for a number of years. We have been planning to raise 40 or 50 children ourselves. Just as fast as we get any money, we will invest it in children. I've done that for several years. Every single dollar that can be saved from other necessary expenses goes into the education of children. I do not believe we have any right to accumulate money. I think as long as we are well and have God's blessing upon our work, it is our duty to spend what we earn in God's work. I do not believe that in this age any man has a right to accumulate money. Now, again, if you were paying close attention, there might be a couple of items that would have caught your attention. First thing was the whole 40 or 50 children. You spotted that, didn't you? Yeah. That's worth noting. And then there's this bit about not saving money. Now bear in mind, this is like pre-Social Security United States. Pre-retirement fund United States, okay? You had no IRAs, you had no whatever else is, I don't remember all the abbreviations now, but yeah, you didn't have that. You either saved money, or when you stopped working, you were broke. And again, you either saved money or you saved capital, which you could then sell off, sell your farm piece by piece or something, whatever, so that you could stay alive. And Kellogg's saying, don't save money. I don't think that's the right thing to do. Was he serious? I mean, those are both fairly radical type of things to say. Was he serious about this? Well, I can tell you that he and his wife raised 42 children. They legally adopted 18, and the other 17, or whatever the number is, 27, whatever it is, 27, whatever it is. Anyhow, the others were, we would call them foster children, basically. But they raised 42. I'm not so sure about his bank account. I don't know. I know he was extremely generous. I know that he worked for years and years on a salary of $1 a year at the sanitarium. He was not hung up on money for himself in the least. He did hundreds of charity operations. He loved to go down to Chicago and to serve down in the slums where they had the Chicago mission work. Kellogg was an extremely generous guy. He put about 50 students through medical school, free of charge, paid for it. When they would have general conference sessions, he would provide in the sanitarium, he'd make the sanitarium available for lodging, and the sanitarium provided meals for all the delegates for free. Once, even after he was disfellowshipped, which is a little weird. He was a generous guy. Well, okay. Let's go on. At the General Conference of 1891, they passed the motion there. Let's see, I guess I should read this a little bit. Oh, yes. Kind of in relation to that matter of saving funds. I'm just going to throw this out here because it speaks to me. I'm not sure what it says sometimes. It speaks to me. Does that make sense? I don't know if you know that feeling. To me, this is important. I don't know exactly how to apply it. But there's a statement from Desire of Ages. You probably read it. In the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. I used to read that statement and I think, yeah, that's going to be a tough time. That's going to be a serious, serious, tough time. Well, I hope I'm ready for that. And then by happenstance, I ran into another statement that used the same phrasing, and so it caught my attention. It said this: it is safe to let go every earthly support and take the hand of him who lifted up and saved the sinking disciple on the stormy sea. Well, that was encouraging. Okay, every earthly support is going to be cut off, but it's still safe as long as you hang on to Jesus. I'm good with that. But that intrigued me so much, I said, I'm going to just do a quick search for that phrase, every earthly support. Does that show up anywhere else? Yes, it does. We can never perfect a round, full Christian experience until every earthly support is removed and the soul centers its entire affections about God. Amen. Now, it sort of makes sense when you kind of wrap your brain around backwards and you think about exactly when was it a good idea for a Christian to depend on earthly support? And the answer to that was pretty much never. And so it kind of stands everything on its head. This terrible, horrible, trying experience at the end of time turns out to be exactly the one thing that I want and need. If I want to be like Christ. That's exactly, look, the terrible ordeal is the goal. Well, that's kind of weird. That kind of twisted my head around backwards. Okay, well anyhow, so Kellogg makes this motion about the sanitary, about the orphanage. In a year's time, the church gave enough money to barely buy the property. Kellogg was in a real bind. Oh, I can't tell all these stories, I'm going to kill myself all the time here. Kellogg got into a situation where people were dropping off kids. Okay, he had orphans. He had an orphanage. He needed a building. He needed an orphanage. Okay, so Mrs. Carolyn Haskell came along to the sanitarium to visit, and she made the largest donation the denomination had ever received up to that time. And with her funds, the Haskell Home for Orphan Children was built. There was not a dime of Adventist money that went into that building because Mrs. Haskell was not an Adventist. She was no relation to Stephen Haskell, by the way. If you have any confusion in your mind as to what inflation is doing to the value of your money, bear in mind that was constructed for $30,000. I'm thinking you could probably not buy the doorknobs for $30,000 today. I know you could buy the windows. Anyhow, okay. So the church didn't respond very strongly to the plea for support of the orphanage. And the Lord used a non-Adventist to come along and to build this orphanage to take care of our Adventist orphans. Okay, well, other things were happening at about the same time, 1892. There was a 17-year-old girl who came to the sanitarium. She spent about 6 weeks, and then she went back down to Chicago for an operation. Why exactly she went to Chicago for an operation eludes me, because Dr. Kellogg at that time was right in the middle of setting a world record for successive operations without a fatality. Okay? This was at a time when between 20 and 25% of thoracic operation patients would die. Okay? 1 out of every 4, 1 out of every 5 were going to die the moment you sliced into their chest cavity. Kellogg set a record of, I don't remember, 128 or something like that without a fatality. Nonetheless, for whatever reasons, the young lady went back to Chicago. She had the operation. It was a very critical operation. It was not successful. When she came out of her anesthesia, she was told, and everyone knew, that she would die. There was, I don't know what the condition was, but there was no chance of her recovery at that point. On her deathbed, she pled with her father, who was some sort of I think he was a banker in Chicago, and she said, "Daddy, as a memorial for me, I want you to do something. I'm asking this of you." She says, "There are no nurses anywhere on this planet like those nurses in the Battle Creek Sanitarium. I want you to pay to bring one of them down here to work for the poor people in the slums of Chicago." Well, the young lady died. The father writes a letter. Dr. Kellogg gets the letter. He's busy, has other things to do, so he ignores it. Father writes another letter. Kellogg ignores that. Father writes another letter. Kellogg ignores that. And then the man got lucky or smart, take your pick, and his wife write a letter. Kellogg had a soft spot in his heart for mothers. Who can say no to them all? So he's got to come up with a nurse from Chicago. So he marches over or into the nurses section or whatever, office or something, and he hunts up Emily Schratz, the best nurse in the sanitarium. I'm not positive that this is Emily. This is definitely one of the visiting nurses, of which Emily was the first. And says, "Emily, would you go down to Chicago and work for the poor people there in Chicago?" She said yes, and she went down at on the financial support of this non-Adventist businessman. She went down and she worked in a section of town, the down and out section of town, sometimes referred to as the brewery in reference to the prevailing diet, and otherwise it was known as Hell's Half Acre, but a lot of people objected to that name because it was clearly larger than that. And so, this was a place where the police would not go. They just wouldn't. And they stopped the nurses very frequently. "Excuse me, ma'am, no, don't want to go down that street." And they would point to the little cross on their uniform and say, "It's okay, officer, I'm fine, thank you." And they'd go in there, and the people in the district loved them. They were the only people on earth that treated them with respect. Great stories came out of there. Dr. Kellogg used to tell the stories because they were dramatic and involving brushes with danger and life-threatening situations and things like this. He used to love to tell those stories. I have to skip ahead. Well, that was 1892. Same year as the sanitarium, 1892. In November of 1892, actually in January, February, I have an unauthenticatable copy, let's put it that way, of what appears to be a Kellogg article, and it's dated January, February 1892. I've not been able to verify that it's accurate, or that the date is accurate. Maybe the date is wrong, I don't know. But in that article, Kellogg lays forth an idea. He says, "Let's start Christian help bands." Now, once again, we've run into a highly technical term. A Christian help band is a band of Christians who try to help people. Okay? So, he said, "Let's start Christian help bands." And in early November of 1892, he gathered it was a Friday night, he gathered all the sanitarium personnel that he could. He said, "Let's start a Christian help band." Everybody says, "What's that?" A Christian help band, as originally envisioned, consisted of one leader whose job was to make sure everything happened, 2 mothers helpers, give or take, more or less, middle-aged ladies who could visit every home in a certain section of the community, from 5th Street to 8th Street, Lincoln to Madison Avenue, or something, whatever it is, okay? This is your territory. You visit every home in this district, find out how they're doing, what their needs are, if there's something that they need help with. And then there were 3 young gentlemen known as burden bearers. Their job was to pack stuff around, no particular intelligence required. And then you had 2 nurses and a Bible reader. And that was a 9-member Christian help band. So on that Friday night in November of 1892, they formed Christian Help Band number 1. And then they set off to see what they could do to help people. They did simple stuff. And this is important in a sense because it broadens the concept when we say medical mission work. When I say medical mission work, that doesn't mean you have to be a doctor or a dentist or a chiropractor or a phlebotomist or, you don't have to have any medical training whatsoever to be a medical missionary. If you can rake leaves for the little old lady next door who is unsteady on her feet out in the yard, that's medical mission work. Okay? Just all it means is helping people. In fact, before we called it medical mission work, we referred to it as Christian help work or the benevolent work. Those are the titles that we used before 1893 when the first medical missionary work title came into vogue. Okay, that was all happening in 1892. There's one more important event, the one that everybody has paid attention to, in 1892. November 22, 1892, Ellen White's comment, printed in the Review and Herald, said, "The loud cry of the third angel has already begun in the revelation of the righteousness of Christ." We have traditionally, historically, equated this or tied this to the 1888 General Conference session, right? Righteousness by faith, Jones-Wagner, all that package of things. I believe that's correct, but not exhaustive. Let's put it that way. It should be tied to those things, but it includes more than that. Because, notice, I think maybe we'll come to that later on. Let's just go ahead. So, November 1892, Ellen White writes, "The loud cry has begun." Now, it's important that she wrote that because we wouldn't have known otherwise. Okay? The loud cry, which was to lighten the entire earth, had begun, but you wouldn't find it on the front pages of the New York Times. Okay? You wouldn't find it on the San Francisco Chronicle. You wouldn't find it anywhere. Because no human being was smart enough to know that it happened until Ellen White was told that it had begun. It had only barely begun. The loud cry pretty much started as a bit of a whisper, I suppose. But it was coming. It was building. It had begun. And it's important that we note that and that we respect and honor that because that's the furthest along on the little Adventist eschatological time chart that we've ever gotten, right? You got the dark ages, you got all the signs and the stars in the sky and the dark day and the Lisbon earthquake and all that stuff. You got the whole Millerite movement, and then you come along and you got the little time of trouble and all this sort of stuff. And eventually you get down here and there's a second coming. Well, the loud cry is down near this end, and it had begun. It's the farthest we've ever gotten on that chart. So we need to remember that. About 2 months later, there was a General Conference session in 1893. There's the dates. A.T. Jones, this is what it's famous for, the Third Angel's Message. That series has been reprinted at least 3 times. It's all over if you get your hands on it. What has been ignored is that Dr. Kellogg also presented a series of 8 talks on medical missionary work at the General Conference. Well, some of it was during the ministerial retreat and then in the General Conference itself. If you wanted to find out what Kellogg said in those talks, you would normally go looking at the official record of the General Conference session, the General Conference Bulletin. I can save you the time. It's not there. You will find no reference to what Kellogg said in 1893 in the General Conference Bulletin. With this one exception. On the very first page, it says Dr. Kellogg will be giving a series of health talks in the afternoon. or a series of talks on medical missionary in the afternoon. There is no record of it. I don't have time to go through all that. I'm just going to have to move along here or somehow. Since I'm going to start looking again. Oops, okay. Long story short, it was published in Dr. Kellogg's own magazine because, and I'm just going to assert this without telling you all the reasons I believe it to be the case. I believe he was edited out. They said, you know what, Kellogg has caused trouble in the past, we're not going to print his stuff. Forget it. They left him out. And so he published it in his own magazine called the Medical Missionary. The Medical Missionary was not an official denominational publication, so the General Conference Archives does not have copies of the Medical Missionary publication. And so for basically about 110 years or so, almost no one knew that Kellogg had ever made these presentations at the 1883 General Conference session. Okay, so I just have to go through this. So what did he say in 1893 that was important? It was important, okay? He said, we should be doing good works. And he started off quoting, I'm just going to have to go through this, he quoted a whole bunch of Bible verses. Equip for every good work, maintain good works, meet urgent needs, maintain good works, his own special people, zealous for good works. He just simply said, listen, folks, we ought to be doing good works. That's what we ought to be doing, okay? And I'm going to skip over that for the sake of time. I'm going to skip over that. I'm going to skip over a lot of things, unfortunately. Let's go here. Kellogg speaking. He says, we cannot give moral power to move the world until we get where we will do what the scriptures and the testimonies say we must do. We have not done it yet. We have waited for outside people to come in and build our orphans' home. The Lord may be ready to start the loud cry, but we are not ready. We have not done our part, and the Lord is waiting for us to do something in the direction of good works. This is so fascinating to me. Does anybody here consider themselves, reasonably informed and interested in the whole 1888 issue? Is that something that rings a bell with you? Okay. Do you recognize the name Robert Whelan? Okay. Robert Whelan was a relative of mine. Should tell, relatively. And we had a number of discussions. And I remember telling him, I said, Elder, I don't think, let's put this, he spent 60 years of his life trying to find the answer to what started the loud cry. What cut it off, and how do we restart it? That was the burden of his life for 60 years, from 1950 to 2010. And I talked to him in, it would have been late 90s probably, and again, a couple of times, something, And we were chatting. And I said, Elder, I don't think it's theological. The spark plug for this is not just theology. I wish I could tell you the whole story. Anyhow, and he was gracious. He says, Dave, what do you think it is? I said, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I don't think it's just theology. He had spent 60 years, or he was in the process at that point, he was spending 60 years trying to find basically a theological silver bullet. If we can only figure out what Jones and Wagner said in 1880, how did they construct their argument? What was the magic thing that made it take off in the loud cry? I told him, I don't think it's theology. He said, well, what do you think it is? I said, I don't know. He said, well, Dave, that's nice. When you find something, give me a call. In the meantime, I'm going to keep working on the theology. Perfectly sensible position. Okay. What happens here, 100 and some odd years after the fact, when Kellogg's sermons come to light, we find out that 2 months after Ellen White said that the loud cry had begun, Kellogg is saying the loud cry is never going to go anywhere in strength until we unite it with the medical missionary work. Because the medical missionary work is the fulfillment of Isaiah 58, and the end of Isaiah 58, all those promises that were right in the high place of the earth, feed you the heritage of Jacob, your father, be like a tree, or water, and garden whose waters fail not, the streams, all that stuff. He says, that's the loud cry. He says, but it's all conditional. If you deal your bread and hungry, if you bring the poor or cast out your house, if you break every yoke, if you do the medical mission thing, it's tied to that. And 2 months after she makes this statement, the loud cry has begun, he stands up and he offers this explanation. And it's edited out of the General Conference Bulletin, and almost no one sees it for 110 years. It landed in my lap 2 months after Robert Wheeler died. I would have loved to talk to you about that. Anyhow, going on, he says, if the loud cry has been begun by our people, and there was no one saying that but Ellen White, like I said, New York Times didn't know anything about it yet. If the loud cry, he's not, I should say, Kellogg is not saying this if as in doubt, but is as a formal hypothetical assertion. Does that make sense? He's not fighting Ellen White. Okay. If the loud cry has been begun by our people, it must be because we have just begun to do a little in the way of letting our light shine. But we've done so little in that way that it seems to me that before the loud cry will make any great noise in the world, we will have to let our light shine a great deal brighter than we have ever yet done, because the works come first. The light must shine through these good works before we can be called the repairers, the breach, the restorers, the paths to dwelling, for that promise comes after all of these conditions, you see. This section right here, I think, is just about dead on. The loud cry had only just begun. No one even knew about it. But the Lord could look down and say, hey, I see what's going on. And if I can just super duper simplify it, here's the way I see it. Jones and Wagner came preaching faith. They said, you should have faith in God. God is sufficient. He will provide all your needs. He is the answer to every problem. Excellent service. Excellent presentation. Kellogg took that and said, if God's got my back, I can spend my time helping others. And that's the love cry. Just as simple as can be. United with all the truth and the doctrines of the 30 Angels message. I'm not dismissing that. Okay, don't ever jump to that conclusion. But that's where it's at. That's what Kellogg said. Okay? He quoted, along the way, he quoted this really cool Bible verse. I'm sure I've read it sometime, but I never noticed it. He who has pity on the poor lends to the Lord, and he will pay back what he has given. Now, suppose I am in need. I need $100. That's, I just do. I just need $100. And so let's say I go to Kevin here, and I say, hey, could you lend me $100? And you would say, what a nice guy. Yeah, either one of them. I got a couple of them lined up there just as a fallback case. Anyhow, okay, so unbeknownst to them, I now have 200. Okay, now, one or the other or both have lent to me. How does that change our relationship? I now owe. If they lend it to me, I owe them. If I have pity on the poor, I lend to the Lord. God owes me now. And says he'll pay it back. He recognizes the debt. He'll pay it back.
So you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. Okay. Here's Ellen White's statement again. The time of test is just upon us, for the loud cry of the third angel has already begun. The revelation of the righteous Christ, sin pardoning Redeemer. This is the beginning of the light of the angel whose glory shall fill the whole earth. I just want you to notice this one particular word. The word is not proclamation. The loud cry, like the revelation of the character of the Father, cannot be done through words alone. It is a revelation of the character of Christ, which must be accomplished through the doing of good works. Just as Christ could only express the fullness of the character of the Father through his actions, the best he could do with his words is John 3:16, right? Good words, nothing wrong with words, they're just words. It takes more than words to do a revelation. God's purpose in committing to men and women the mission that he committed to Christ is to disentangle his followers from all worldly policy and to give them a work identical with the work that Christ did. Let us remember that it is not by word and precept alone that we are to reveal Christ's character. In act as well as in word, we shall reveal to the world the character of the unseen. The loud cry, as I understand it at this point, my perception of things, the loud cry was built on the theology of Jones and Wagner and the practical application of Calvin. And it took the combination before the loud cry was begun. Ellen White says some remarkable things about medical missionary work and such. I want to tell you that when the gospel ministers and the medical missionary workers are not united, there is placed on our churches the worst evil that can be placed there. That would represent the condition of the church largely, at least in North America, for about the last 110 years. We have not, in any marked sense, maintained a union between our medical and our evangelistic work. And when Ellen White writes this, I wish to do a little English. What part of speech is the word worst? Is it a noun? What is it? It's an adjective. It's a special kind of adjective. What kind of adjective do we call it?
It's the worst kind of adjective.
It's the worst kind. It is a superlative adjective. Okay? Big, bigger, biggest, right? Bad, worse, worst. There is nothing worse than the worst. Unless you do like the worsterest.
Worst.
Don't do it. Okay? Just don't do it. Okay? It's as bad, it's super, you know, it's superlative. It's as far as you can go. It's just serious. You know? Really. This is the worst evil when our doctors or our evangelists are not working together? That is the worst evil? Yeah, I think it is. I think it is. And that's roughly where we've been since pretty much the days of God. I'm going to skip that. Don't have time. Oh, I have to read that one. I have to read that one. Wow. Now, see, it's talking about Christ's ministers, okay? So I want to black that out for just a second. Let's not be too quick to just point to the professional ministers and say, this applies to you, brother. Yeah. I think it does apply to them. I think it also applies to us, in measure at least. Okay? To any degree, when we claim to be Christians and working for the Lord, it applies to us. Okay, so here's the statement. Christ's ministers must stand in an altogether different position. They must be evangelists. That's cool, we understand that. They must be medical missionaries. Follow it? Christ's ministers must be medical missionaries. They must take hold of the work intelligently, but it is of no use for them to think that they can do this when they drop the work which God has said should be connected with the gospel. If they drop out the medical missionary work, they need not think they can carry forward their work successfully, for they have only half the necessary facilities. What does necessary mean? It's a requirement. You've got to have it. This is why it's the worst evil. It's because we can spend our entire life doing quote-unquote good things, thinking we're going to finish the Lord's work, when it's absolutely categorically impossible. You can't do it that way. Won't ever happen. I think that's why it's the worst evil. Okay, well, I'm going to... Yeah, I should be shutting up, so I should be. Not quite yet. Okay, got a couple more minutes. I'm going to just paraphrase a whole bunch of stuff here. Here's basically what happened. For a variety of reasons, a lot of people didn't like Dr. Keller. They found it hard to relate to him. And you can cite all sorts of reasons. He was human, and he had his own personal set of flaws, no doubt. He was also an educated guy when most Adventists did not have any college education. They were good-hearted farmers type of thing who became ministers. They didn't have a bunch of fancy, schmancy education. I'm not criticizing education, but from their perspective, they could see this. They could see Kellogg in this way, perhaps. I think there was probably room for some degree of envy to develop. I mean, Kellogg was famous, and they were not. And they were working as hard as he was. What's the deal? How come he gets all the fame and, we just get people that throw eggs at our evangelistic tents? What's up with that? There was also a bit of a problem because the ministers, Ellen White notes, the ministers as a class were slow in adopting health reform. Now, before we blame the ministers and say, those evil ministers, what an unconsecrated batch of spiritual hooligans, stop and think for a minute. We didn't have a settled ministry in those days. Our ministers were itinerant, largely. They were evangelists traveling around with tents and things like this. This is the 1880s, 1890s, whatever years type of thing. You try being a vegetarian. Traveling around, you stop in at a restaurant. Really? You think you're going to get fresh spring salad in the middle of December? And they weren't flying it in from Peru every day back in those days. You ain't got a chance, brother. What are you going to eat? Salt beef and hard biscuit. Oh, but I'm a vegetarian. Well, welcome to the hard biscuit. I think it was probably pretty tough. I think it was tough being a vegetarian. Anyway, they didn't have refrigerators. They didn't have blenders. I can be a vegetarian without a blender. Figure that out. I heard enough about blender. Okay. I don't know how they did it. Okay, remarkable people. But the ministers tended to lag behind, and that irritated Kellogg. And so he got a little tick at him now and then. They did things to irritate him, he did things to irritate them. And you got to be kind of, I poke you in your eye, you poke me in my eye, type of thing. There got to be a little hostility thing going on. There was distinct animosity directed against the doctor. Stated here. Dr. Kellogg has needed the sympathy and confidence of his brother. There should have been a tender compassion for him in his position of trust. They should have pursued a course that would have gained and retained his confidence. God would have it thus, but there has been instead a spirit of suspicion and criticism. If the doctor fails in doing his duty and being an overcomer at last, those brethren who have failed in their want of wisdom and discernment to help the man when and where he needed their help will be in a large measure responsible. We are, in fact, our brother's keeper. The Lord has given Dr. Kellogg his work. It is a fact that our ministers are very slow to become health reformers, notwithstanding all the light which the Lord has given upon the subject. This has caused Dr. Kellogg to lose confidence in them. Their tardy work in health reform has created in him a spirit of criticism. He has borne down on them in an unsparing manner, which the Lord does not sanction. He has belittled the gospel ministry, and in his regard and ideas has placed the medical missionary work above the ministry. I have seen that in the censuring of ministers, remarks have been made which have not been to the honor and glory of God. So there was developing a rift, an animosity between the medical work and the ministerial one. Eventually, I'm going to have to scoot along here to make sense of this. Eventually, Dr. Kellogg began to actively undermine the ministry to his medical students, to his nursing staff, and things like that. Was it his fault? Yes, it was his fault. Was it only his fault? No, it wasn't only his fault, right? Had Dr. Kellogg's brethren stood with him in the first of his experience in connection with health reform, the present condition of things would not now exist. But Dr. Kellogg criticized the ministry, and Ellen White told him to knock that off. Do not, I beg of you, instill into the minds of the students ideas that will cause them to lose confidence in God's appointed ministers. But this you are most certainly doing, whether you are aware of it or not. The work done for those who come to you for instruction is not complete unless they are educated to work in connection with the church. Well, the rift continued to grow, and eventually it was, shall we say, ignited by events following the burning down of the sanitarium in 1902. Dr. Kellogg had to quickly decide whether he was going to rebuild the sanitarium in Battle Creek or otherwise. There really seems to have been no question as to what Kellogg himself wanted to do, although there are indications that he played the game. Okay. Well, I didn't know, should I rebuild it here? Of course, everybody in town wanted him to rebuild it because it was a huge draw, right? It was a big, brought a lot of money to Battle Creek. And so he kind of played the game with all the local townsfolk and businessmen. Well, I didn't know if I should do this or not. Maybe I should go somewhere. Oh, no, Dr. Kellogg, please, we'll give you tax breaks. We'll give you, you know, please rebuild it, you know. And he milked that for all it was worth. Okay, we know that much. So there's a little lack of Christian forthrightness, at the very least, going on there in that regard. We're just going to need a lot more money than that. And so he suggested a plan. He said, hey, I've just written a book. I'll donate the profits from my book. You get the Review and Herald to print it for cost. We'll get the church members to sell it, and all the profits will go to rebuild the sanitarium. That'd be really great. Everybody thought, what a wonderful idea. How very generous of Dr. Kellogg. And I think it was generous. Unfortunately, there were problems. The book was The Living Temple, and it did contain, as near as I can tell without ever having read it, which I refuse to do, because the Spirit Prophecy says don't read the book. So I haven't read the book, but as near as I can tell of reports from other people who did read the book back in the day, we would look at this today and we'd say the amount of pantheism in there is very small. You can find far, 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 far worse in any health food store. Okay. Not necessarily from Adventist publications. I'm not saying that. You will find far worse in Adventist publications. But, it's nothing compared to what you run into in magazines on the street today. Okay. Nonetheless, it was a serious concern. And this led to heightened animosity back and forth. So a lot of things going on. I'd love to go through all the story of it. But, yes, sir.
Yeah, could you explain pantheism real quickly for those who don't know what that is?
That's good, yeah, okay. It's Latin. Theo, same as we have for theology, meaning God, right? Ism just means the condition of. Pan means all across. So the basic idea is that God is everywhere. That tree out there, that tree is God. That bird over there, that bird is God. Question?
So is theology the study of God? Is that what it was meant in the first place? That's weird because now people don't look at it as that.
Yeah, it's a little bit weird.
It's really weird.
Yeah. And basically, theology is the study of God and His acts.
Okay.
Yeah. Pantheism, depending on which particular era of reference you might be, used to in your mind, pantheism, we would call it pantheism, or Hinduism, or New Age-ism, right? If you remember 20 years ago when the New Age terminology, today it might be just referred to as spiritual. I'm spiritual. Everything is spiritual. What does that mean? But the belief that God is everywhere and in everything, you'll find some of that in Kellogg's book. Not a great deal, from all I can tell. And again, I haven't read the book, so whatever that's worth to. I won't read the book. I refuse to read the book. But there is some. And so this raised alarms. Now, to be honest, it raised alarms almost solely with Ellen White. The truth is that Kellogg was not the first Adventist to teach pantheism, nor was he the one who did it the most, nor was he the one who went the furthest in teaching Adventism, or teaching pantheism. Probably the one who taught pantheism with the most authority and vigor, so to speak, was J.H. Wagner, or E.J. Wagner, E.J. Wagner. According to A.G. Daniels, Wagner was the primary pantheist, and Kellogg was simply kind of echoing. Embarrassingly, Wagner had worked in London, England, before coming back to the United States in about 1900, something like that. And working closely with him was a guy by the name of W.W. Prescott, William Warren Prescott. Prescott adopted and advocated pantheism too, and said some of the most bizarre things. Prescott got corrected, reconverted, whatever, straightened out about 1901. Perhaps question.
He was a graduate of Dartmouth College.
He was a graduate of Dartmouth, yes. Yeah. An interesting fellow. A good man, but prone to his own peculiar set of human weaknesses, just like all the rest of us. But anyhow, Prescott now was, after the General Conference of 1901, Prescott was the General Conference Vice President. And he had gotten himself straightened out more or less, but Kellogg was slow. Kellogg wasn't a theologian, he was a doctor. And so he lagged a few years behind on his theology type of thing, okay? But he'd heard all these other guys, and he approached it from a medical perspective. You know, who's going to talk about bodies and tissues and things, you know, better than a medical guy, right? So Kellogg takes up this, he writes, the living temple. That's this. The body is the living temple of God, because God lives in that tree and that bird and all of you, regardless of your spiritual condition. You could be a drunk mass murderer, and God still lives in you, because God is everywhere. And all life comes from God. Well, yeah, that part's true. All life does come from God, now that you mention it. But all life is not God himself. Okay, and so this whole thing broke down into trying to define all these little terms. What is God? What is life? What is all this kind of stuff. And they got into a definitions game, something along the lines of, did you tithe the mint leaves? Did you remember your mint leaves? You got the mint leaves, you got to tithe, yeah? And it's so hung up on trying to be intelligent and capture everything with such precision, it makes us feel good, I guess. I don't know. Anyhow, so the whole thing devolved into a nasty mess that involved pantheism but went far beyond that. Okay? And it's the far beyond part where we see the tactics of Lucifer coming back into play. And so here we have a gentleman who was God's physician, the greatest doctor on earth, or in our world today, whatever, the one who could do more good for the church than any other man, the one who Ellen White would work harder to save than for her own sons. All this is documentedly true, okay? Willie White said that last part, and he said it with absolutely no malice whatsoever. He said, I believe Mother would work more diligently to save Dr. Kellogg's soul than she would for either of her sons, because she's told me so many times how important he is to God's cause. Well, anyhow, let's move on. I'm going to skip over a little bit. So along the way, as Kellogg was deteriorating, Ellen White started making, she made a few comments, nothing made, that tied an interesting relationship together. She says this: many will depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. We have now before us the alpha of this danger. The omega will be of a most startling nature. Okay, so alpha is the first letter in the Greek alphabet, right? Actually, we get our name alphabet from alpha, beta, gamma, pain, right? Now, alpha, beta, alphabet, that's the first two letters, that's where we get the name, the letter alpha, or the name alpha. Alpha was the first letter, omega was the last letter. We call it a Z in English, right? So what she says is we have the beginning of the apostasy here, and the omega, the ending, will come. Okay? In the most startling nature. Notice here. Living temple contains the alpha of these theories. I knew that the omega would follow in a little while, and I trembled for our people. This is where I got the title from my book, Tremble, by the way. In the book Living Temple, there is presented the alpha of deadly heresies. The omega will follow and will be received by those who are not willing to heed the warning God has given. These are the only 3 times that she makes a specific tie in a close proximity between alpha and omega. But 3 times is enough. You're talking about inspiration. Actually, once is enough. You know. These statements don't give us a lot of information. It'll be startling, it'll come in the future, and those who don't receive the warning will accept it. Well, it was too trouble for our people. So what do we know about the omega? Not a lot. There's very little specifically said about the omega. We know quite a bit more about the alpha because it's a historical situation. We can read about what was going on back then. So, how do you learn about the omega? Well, the only way you can do that is by understanding the relationship between the alpha, which we kind of comprehend, and the omega, which we haven't seen yet. Okay? If I told you, go north 3 miles and you'll come to my house. Well, as long as you were in the right spot, that would be true. You could go north 3 miles and boom, there's my house. You maybe had never seen my house before, but if you say, okay, 1 mile, 2 miles, 3 miles, that must be Dave's house. Okay? You can know things that you've not seen or known before by understanding the relationship between a known point and this other point. Does that make sense? You with me on that? Okay, so what's the relationship between the alpha and the omega? And I think the devil pulled a quick one on us on this for about 60 years, actually. When the statements first came out, everyone said, oh man, Kellogg did something terrible and he's going to do something more that's terrible. That's the omega. We keep an eye on Kellogg. But over time, Kellogg kind of, he was disfellowshipped in 1907, he kind of drifted away, had less and less to do with the church. By the 1920s, I think it was Taylor Bunch, I'm not positive on that. A good man. But somebody came up with a different idea. They said, you know what? I think we got this backwards. The alpha is the furthest letter you can go that way. And the omega is the furthest letter you can go that way. The alpha was Kellogg's pantheism. The omega is going to be the opposite. Yeah. That's interesting. So, what's the opposite of pantheism? So, between the 1920s and the 1980s, I think I could probably list off, 5 to 10 different serious suggestions, different, good people said, there's a problem, I think that's the omega, because it's the opposite of pantheism. Well, what's the opposite of pantheism? What's that?
Atheism.
Atheism. Might be. Darwinism? Might be. Julius Gilbert White said it was the pantheism was the internalization of God, the inaccurate internalization of God. The omega was the refusing to recognize the importance of health reform and the preservation of the temple God has given us, or something like that. During the Desmond Ford crisis, people said, oh, this is alpha, this is Ford is omega. Here's the problem. It's almost impossible to reason on the opposites of things. If I say, what's the opposite of salt? Some of you would say,
Sugar.
and others would say, pepper, yeah. So which is the opposite? Yeah. If I said, what's the opposite of a cat? Some of you would say it's a, and you would all be wrong, because the opposite of a cat is a giraffe. Because cats are little tiny things and giraffes are really big and tall. So, how can you reason on opposites, right? Okay. Well, interestingly enough, technology actually helped us this time. In the 1980s, do any of you remember the Ellen White Laserdisc concordance? Big old kludgy thing? Yeah, it was amazing. It was like a Strong's concordance of Ellen White's writings. You could not sit down and read Desire of Ages on it, okay? But you could get every word, with 2 words or 3 words before and 3 words afterwards, type of thing, just like the Strong's concordance does, okay? And so you could rebuild the whole thing, just so you could rebuild the whole Bible from the Strong's concordance if you were really, really determined. But that gave us, for the first time, gave us the opportunity, in any sense, kind of systematically, electronically, so to speak, search the writings of Ellen White. In 1987, I wrote an article in which I said, you know what? The alpha and the omega are not opposites. This is like an acorn, and this is an oak tree. It's not an opposite at all. It's the thing full grown. Right. And I was laughed at. I was mocked. Because no one in 1987 could imagine Adventists being taken up with mystical, pantheistic ideas. That was the stupidest thing in the world. We did that back in 1904. We ain't going to do that again. Well, the times, they are changing. And I submit that, yeah, actually, more than I understood in 87, I was actually right on that. And the sentiment has changed. It is particularly interesting. Some of you may remember Lewis Walton wrote a book called Omega. Came out in 1980. In that particular book, he argued the opposite's position, and he's one who said that Desmond Ford's complete externalization of salvation process is the opposite of the internalization of the whole thing over here. And that was his argument, was that Ford's theology was the omega of apostasy because it was the opposite of pantheism. In 1991 or something, I don't remember exactly, he wrote another book called Omega 2. And in Omega 2, without any particular discussion of it, the alpha and the omega are an acorn and oak tree relationship. And he changed his mind. That's good. I think we all did. Everybody that I know. I don't know of anyone today claiming it's the opposite thing. But it took us a while to get our head straight. Okay. During this whole time period, Kellogg was becoming more and more an advocate for the devil's work. And I want to go ahead, give you some idea of how serious this was here. As I am shown these special things of Satan's science and how he deceived the holy angels, I am afraid of the men who have entered into the study of the sciences that Satan carried into warfare in heaven. Why did we study Lucifer's rebellion in heaven? Because it's the same thing that comes back here. Okay? Oh, how I have longed to be where I should not be compelled to see the same science practiced on this earth by medical practitioners. How my heart has been agonized that I've seen souls accepting the dues and held out to them to unite with those who were warring against God. When they once accept the bait, it seems impossible to break the spell that Satan casts over them. What is the bait? What is the bait that exerts that captivating influence? I'm going to just no claim for direct inspiration. I'll just tell you what I believe it to be, personally. I think this applies far more in our day than it did in Kellogg's day. The best thing that I can point to have any, correlation with that, and that is that there are many, many accounts of people who have had mystical experiences where they have opened their mind to the influence of demonic spirits. And the accounts always run quite similar. They are, shall I say, possessed of this overwhelming sense of oneness with the universe. And there's great peace or I haven't done this, right? So I don't have to worry about their accounts. Others may know better than I. Trust me, others may. But there's this overwhelming sense, and I can point to numerous accounts from folks who ended up becoming Luciferian or pantheist or Gaiist, was it Gaia, the Earth Mother type of thing? Okay, Gaiist, and it doesn't really matter. And it comes from, and you find the same thing from Hindus, you find the same thing from charismatics, you find the same thing from listening to groups later on. And there's this sense of this overwhelming mental enlightenment, the seeing of all being one, which is nothing but pantheism. We're all one. The Beatles, the Beatles sang that, in whatever song it was, I don't remember the lyrics right now, but in the 1970s, they'd gone off to India and they'd spent their time in the ashram over there with the Maharishi and Maharishi Yogi, and they came back and, oh, we are one, and da-da-da, and all that sort of stuff. This is, I'm told, extremely captivating. Once you experience that, it's like, bam, you are never the same. Now, some have been saved out of that experience, praise the Lord, okay? But that's my guess at saying when they once took the bait, it's almost impossible to break the spell. It's like this terrible hold. And as she said, it will be accepted by those who fail to heed the warning. What is the warning? I'm going to just paraphrase because she doesn't specify the warning, but the one warning that she does give over and over and over in this whole time period boils down to don't read the book. Don't read the book. That's why I won't read Living Temple. Just don't read the book. Now today, we would have to expand that. Don't watch those YouTube videos. You know? Don't listen to that music. Don't stay away from the devil's playground. Again, basically. It's at your peril that you ignore that warning. Take not a particle of interest in spiritualistic theories. Satan is waiting to steal march upon everyone who allows himself to be deceived by his hypnotism. He begins to exert his power over them just as soon as they begin to investigate his theories. That's why I won't read the book. Am I curious? Sure, I'm curious. Am I stupid? Yes, but not that stupid. I'm not going to read the book. Okay? I do have enough faith to say, I don't think it's a good idea to read the book. I'm going to avoid that book. I want to avoid a lot of other things that would fall in the same category. Suffer not yourselves to open the lids of a book that is questionable. There is a hellish fascination in the literature of Satan. Never feel that you are strong enough to read infidel books. In reading them, you are inhaling the miasmas of hell. So what was going on with the whole Kellogg thing? Well, Ellen White went to some lengths to try and alert the brethren at the General Conference, some of which is really interesting. She wrote them a letter, a couple of letters actually. Here's one of them. Read in my books, Patriarchs and Prophets, and Great Controversy, the story of the first great apostasy. History is being repeated, and will be repeated. Read then and understand. Kellogg was following in the footsteps of Lucifer. It's no wonder that Lucifer's story explains so much about Kellogg's apostasy. It turns out it was choreographed by the same guy. No greater deception could be presented to the minds of men than the representation you, Dr. Kellogg, have made of God. Souls will be lost with sowing the sentiments found in the living temple and presenting error you have united with the Prince of Darkness. When you wrote that book, you were not under the inspiration of God. There was by your side the one who inspired Adam to look at God in a false light. Remember what happens if false ideas of God are kept before the minds and we become the dupes of satanic deception, right? That's what Satan was trying to do, was to get Adam to look at God in a false light. You have been the spokesman, repeating the words of accusation and condemnation of the arch-deceiver. Your science has been used to benumb the sensibilities and diffuse the judgment of others. In long night talks, you have presented your mind and plans and works, and these have become their mind and plan and works. In listening to your words, these men have imbibed the very science of the tempter. Just as in her discussion of Lucifer in heaven, the thing she mentions the most times was the thing of planting the idea and coming back around and reaping that idea and spreading it, okay? In dealing with Kellogg, the thing that she speaks of, I think the most times and most vehemently, is these long night talks. Just don't do that. Don't do that. Don't let this guy talk to you for hours like that. It's dangerous. She had a vision of Willie being drugged into one of those talks like that. She said, I was frantic. I had to do something to save her. This whole matter has been presented to me. You have worked as Lucifer worked in the heavenly courts to persuade his associates to unite with him. It would have been better for Dr. Kellogg if he had never been born, if he continues to build himself up in his own magical arts of mind in influencing other minds. I would say that in our coverage of this issue, we have focused too exclusively on pantheism as being the issue. It was not the issue. It was a part of the issue. There were many more things that were was hypnotism, there was this mind control, there was intimidation, there was, look at this up here, let's go on. I have not one ray of hope regarding him unless he understands that through satanic agencies he is striving for power over human minds. This has been shown me. Dr. Kellogg is linked up with the great deceiver. He has not realized what he was doing any more than the angels who fell realized what they were doing, but he has tempted Satan to tempt him. He has studied hypnotism and spiritualism for the purpose of bringing minds to endorse sentiments that mean a denial of the faith once delivered to the saints. I have not found any evidence of Kellogg reading spiritualistic or hypnotic books, other than these statements. I can't say that. I certainly can't say that he didn't, but I haven't found it. And it's possible, because the angels didn't realize what they were doing either. It's possible that he linked up with Satan and he learned these things, not so much by sitting down and saying, oh, here's a neat book on spiritualism, I'm going to read this book. He tempted the devil to tempt him, it said. We'll see how that happens. I have seen Dr. Kellogg exerting a hypnotic influence upon persons, and at such times the arch-deceiver was his helper. Dr. Kellogg places himself in the position of one who is abused because he cannot carry everything with him. In other words, he doesn't get everything he wants. But he is still at work with all subtlety. So here's the what are you picking on me sympathy card thing that Lucifer used in heaven, right? Okay? He works with such ingenuity to obtain sympathy that to many his words seem genuine. I'll tell you, it's been a challenge for me, and I'll tell you what I did. I don't know if I did the right thing or not. Let's be honest. I gained access to a large supply of Kellogg's writings and his talks. Minutes from meetings that he held with his sanitarium department heads, in which he was discussing the same ideas that I'm sure eventually ended up in Living Temple. Should I read those? Should I read those? I'm not supposed to read the book. Should I read these minutes? Should I read those? I had asked him, should I read this stuff? Should I read the letters that Kellogg wrote history?
There's a statement that says, all search out the mystery of iniquity.
Oh,
Why all search out the mystery of iniquity.
yeah.
We need to understand how the deceiver works.
Yeah. But
In the
how?
process of it, right, you're going to have to balance it.
There has to be a balance. So here's what I did. That's a affiliated word there. That's cool. Okay. Sorry for the distraction. It wasn't my fault, really. Anyhow, what I said was, for myself, I said, I will not read Kellogg's stuff until I have read every single letter and manuscript that Ellen White wrote to or about Dr. Kellogg first. So it took me about 6 months of steady reading to read. I read everything from 1892 to 1907. Every letter to Dr. Kellogg, every letter about Dr. Kellogg, every manuscript. I get thousands of pages. It got a little tedious, I'll just be honest. But you know what? When I started reading Kellogg's stuff, I was thankful for every page of it. Because if I had read Kellogg's stuff, I'll tell you, I could easily have been suckered in. The guy is so persuasive. It's dangerous. I'll tell you it's dangerous. I know it's dangerous. Okay? But I did read his letters and stuff. And so in none of that do I find where he's literally sitting down saying, I'm going to read this book on hypnotism. I don't find that. But he's practicing the techniques. And it's possible that he learned the techniques of hypnotism direct from the devil without ever going to the trouble of reading a book. I don't know how it happened. Anyhow, gotta finish up. What is mysticism? We need not the mysticism that is in the living temple. Those who entertain these sophisties will soon find themselves in a position where the enemy can talk with them and lead them away from God. Here's my layman's definition of mysticism. Mysticism is any is the belief in any method that allows me, at my convenience, to establish a direct line of communication with God. The most common thing today is mindfulness. Do you have any idea how much disdain I have for the use of that word? You're going to tell me that the practice of emptying your mind of all thought should be called mindfulness. Really? You're going to tell me that? Don't lie. Don't play games with English. Okay? English has problems of its own. It doesn't need your problems. Okay? It's not mindfulness, it's mindlessness. Okay? Where you sit down for 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, you go, and you try not to think about anything. Okay? That's mysticism. Because it's intended to put you into a direct communication with God where you can get your daily fix of dopamine, probably, but you can have a direct contact with God, and the enemy will talk with you. It's not a safe thing to do, and that's not the way it works. The heart of mysticism is the practice of human-controlled contact with the supernatural. Essentially, they claim to be prophets who can, at their own convenience, establish direct contact with the deity they worship. It's worth noting that Ellen White vigorously denied any such practice. Question?
So, for coming into that state, like, how do you, like, balance that? Because, like, sometimes you want to, like, if you were out in nature, just walking around the forest for a while, and, you maybe thinking about God, thinking about nothing, could that go into a state at all? Let's say thinking about nothing.
It's really very hard to think about nothing. You have to work hard to think about nothing.
Okay.
Yeah. And in all probability, unless you were being tutored by someone who was trying to take you in that direction, you would never actually end up thinking about nothing.
So
you might be calm and relaxed and you're just walking through the woods, but you're looking at the flowers or something. You're thinking about things. You're not emptying your mind.
so that's not gonna, that's okay.
I would not consider that. No. It takes deliberate effort, from my understanding. Yes.
From my experience, the Kundalini Yoga, which is the top of the yoga study, unleashes the dragon within.
At the base of the
The
spine.
base, which is the red color, which comes up through the crown chakra.
Yes.
And I think that's why the dragon becomes the symbol of Satan and the self-deception. Here is what you're talking about, the omega apostasy. It has to do with the dragon within, which is really him inside of you, not the divine God.
Right. Yep, I would agree with that. I think I doubt that many people without tutoring are inclined towards the total emptying of their mind. Unfortunately, the world is tutoring us every day now. In all the media, you hear all about it and all that sort of stuff. But without tutoring, I doubt that people would do that. Question, comment?
Comment. When he says that God is in everything, that is not scriptural. Scripture says that if someone does not have the Holy Spirit in them, there is no life in them.
Correct.
So it is within a person, our temple, that we believe in the Lord and that we're one in unity with Him. It's not through, we know that God created all these things, but it doesn't mean that God is in them.
Correct. Yes, agreed. In the special sense of Scripture, God is in those who have chosen to serve Him.
And in essence, He chose us.
He chooses us all, but we have been granted the veto vote. Yeah. Okay. So, but here's the thing. All these people and all this mindfulness, which I great every time I have to say that. Anyhow, and this, and the meditation type of thing, and the yoga, and all that sort of stuff. Their goal, it seems to me, without, I'm not the most authoritative person, because I haven't gone through this. Others have, and bless our hearts, that those have been pulled out of it. But the goal seems to be to have this encounter with the universe, this sense of oneness, this whole big thing, okay? And to do so at their own convenience, that there's a method that they can use. This is the basis of Ignatius Loyola's spiritual exercises, right? The Lectio Divina, for those of you who may recognize that term, all these different weird things that empty your mind. This is the whole purpose of the Hindu mantra. you say yabba dabba do 5,000 times, and after a while, it ceases to have any meaning, it becomes a blur of your head. Yes, that's what I'm told. I haven't done that. I don't want to do that. But the whole point is that if I do this, I am in control of establishing my contact with God. Yes, sir.
And I think it's, in my experience in martial arts, there's a type of that where you get to feel the Mother Earth as giving you some kind of power.
Yes.
And so I've done something like that in the past. And what's scary is the addiction to that power, because it's literally, it's not something like, oh, you're just gonna be empty your mind. You literally feel the power. So it's not something that you can say, I deny that it doesn't exist. You literally feel it. I feel it in me. I fainted at one point because of the practice that I was doing.
Sure.
And you would say, why would you faint? What were you doing? But you literally feel that power in you, and then they practice more and more in order to use that power for something else.
Yes.
But it's the I think that experience when you're in it that makes you feel like this is real, and there's no denial, because I've experienced it, I felt it.
Yep. Yep. And that, I think, this is what I'm suggesting, and I don't know, I trust me, I'm not an authority on the experiential aspects of this in any sense. But it's that sense of power that I think, that once they've taken the bait, it's almost impossible to break. It's captivating.
Well, it's a doorway to the spiritual world.
Yeah.
Because then you're engaging now with entities that you think are fallen ancestors, this is my case.
Yeah.
So it opens the door up to spiritualism.
Yep, very much. Now what strikes me, yes sir, Pastor?
Oh, no, I was gonna say, are we at a point where we could do a break and enter into the second part of the seminar?
We could do that.
Or we don't have to right now, but as far as comments and questions and such, there's gonna be a lot of opportunity after the second seminar to open up for that, but
that's
just
good.
so we can make sure that we pack it in for everybody.
Yeah, we want to be somewhat sensitive to those who may feel they have a real life somewhere else and they need to go. I'm trying not to totally kill your whole Sabbath afternoon, and I'm obviously over time, so I'm not doing this perfectly, but I'm trying, sort of. Here's a contrast I want to make, though, is that all these mind-centering, yoga, meditative, mindfulness, whatever else type folks, they're seeking this experience, okay? Early in Ellen White's career, it was said of her that she said she could have a vision whenever she wanted. It always fascinated me how vehemently she denied that. And I saw no reason, and it's kind of like, relax. You're kind of overreacting, don't you think? And I didn't realize why she would so vehemently deny somebody's, okay, so somebody made a mistake, they misquoted her, they listened to some gossip or something. Just say, no, I never said that, that's fine. No, she doesn't react that way. Notice. Probably this one. It is utterly false that I have ever intimated I could have a vision when I please. There is not a shade of truth in this. I have never said I could throw myself into visions when I please, for this is simply impossible. There's a vehemence there, okay? I have felt for years that if I could have my choice and please God as well, I would rather die than have a vision. For every vision places me under great responsibility to bear testimonies of reproof and of warning which has ever been against my feelings. I know of at least 3 places which is I would rather die. I don't want a vision. I would rather die. And everybody else is saying, oh, you just have to meditate 20 minutes in the morning. But I'm thinking, dude, you're chasing the wrong fish. This is not the same experience. Don't try to tell me that, okay? And we got people who, with, I don't know, somehow possibly good intentions, trying to compare Ellen White to other mystical individuals. This is not wise. In my opinion, it is not wise. Mysticism is nothing new. Okay? It's kind of new to a lot of us in North America. It's been fairly recent. Now, I'm dating myself a little bit, because some of you younger people, you've grown up and it's been in the air that you've breathed since the day you were born. Okay. For my generation, it's kind of weird. This is weird stuff. Spacey people out there these days. You know, and that's kind of the way we look at it. Probably if you're a little bit younger, it's like just normal. That's just normal. That's spooky to me. You can find mystics anywhere. It's kind of weird. There are mystics in Catholicism, all the way from the Desert Fathers back in the 200s, up through the 2nd, 3rd centuries and whatnot, down to Pope Francis today, is the first Jesuit pope. Jesuits are by training and definition mystics. You have to practice the Ignatian spiritual exercises, which are designed to encourage a mystical experience. Okay, so Catholicism has, not all Catholics are mystics in the sense of having this direct communication with God, but there is a mystical wing of Catholicism. Let's put that way. In Protestantism, you have the charismatic movement, functionally the same. In Judaism, it's called Kabbalah. That's what Madonna was into a few years back, which is good enough reason to avoid it. In Islam, you have the Sufi sect. They're the mystics of Islam, right? In Hinduism, it's every guru. In Buddhism, it's every priest. In animism, it's the shamans, the witch doctors, right? And in atheism, mystics? In atheism? Yeah, functionally, I would say pretty much almost exactly the same with the hallucinogenic drug users. Same experience. This is what, it's mind expanding. Same experience, I think. I am the least qualified guy to talk about this, you understand, because I've been this squeaky clean little adventist that knows nothing about all this stuff I experience. Okay, so whatever. But you can fill in the details and adapt as you understand better than I. I will not have my feelings hurt. Okay. Now, the thing about this trance belief system overarching oneness of mysticism is that it ties them all together. Right. And they have no barriers. They don't care. You're a Jew, I'm a Catholic. We're both mystics. Have a happy day. It doesn't matter, okay? You may remember, I don't know, 2 years ago maybe, something like that? Remember that whole reapproachment thing between the Pope and Tony Palmer here? Yeah. Anyhow, I find it amazingly fascinating that he was so conveniently removed from the scene by a motorcycle accident. I don't quite, whatever. But the point is that Palmer was an Anglican priest or something like that. Wasn't he Anglican? I think he was Anglican, supposed to be. And he was good friends with Francis, whatever his name was before he was the Pope, right? And their friendship was founded on mysticism. Because we both talk to the same God. We both have the same experience, right? And then it spread from Palmer and the Pope to the U.S. Protestant mystics, the charismatic churches, right? And so then we get shots like this. Actually, back here on this one, right, there's this Copeland guy, right? You probably watched the video too, right? And Copeland says, the Pope's speaking wonderful things to us. This is all great, and let's all speak in tongues, and we'll all be one, and the sun will shine, and bluebirds will sing. So then we get pictures like this, and I know this is Palmer, and I think this is his wife.
Copeland.
Oh, yeah. Palmer's over here, right, there we go. Palmer and Copeland, and I think that's his wife. I have no idea who the other people are. Maybe you can fill in the blanks for me. I think they're all charismatic types from the States, okay? But that's not the end of it. This is founded on mysticism too. So who are these people? Well, let's see. Hare Krishna? Yeah? Right? With the orange robe? Looks to me to be Orthodox. I'm guessing Sufi or Muslim or something. I don't know. Hinduism with the little red dot. This guy looks like he's a Catholic back here in the back. I don't know about these guys. Shintoism, Confucianism, something, I don't know, looks a little confused, to be honest, I don't know. There's only one guy in the whole picture that I can relate to. That's just, how do we get out of here? I don't know, it's probably some sort of a CIA bodyguard or something, I don't know what he's doing there. But the Pope has no problem with these people. He sees no barriers whatsoever. It doesn't matter. We're all. I tell you in the name of the Lord God of Israel that Satan is presenting his sophistries to ministers and medical workers, and if our people will listen to these sophistries, they will become impregnated with the same satanic idea of a popular religion that will cause them to develop into gods, and there will be no place in their lives for God or for Christ. This mysticism will get the whole room of the heart all ready for miracles that Satan will come to work right in our midst. Okay, I'm going to have to skip over some of this. I'm going to skip that whole concept. It's a great concept, but I'm not going to take that to it. It is something that cannot be treated as a small matter that men who have had so much light and such clear evidence as to the genuineness of the truth we hold should become unsettled and led to accept spiritualistic theories regarding the personality of God. My heart was filled with sorrow because of the course that J.H. Kellogg is following. And A.D. Jones is following the same course and voicing the same sentiments with a most determined spirit. When a realization of this comes over me with such force, great sorrow fills my soul. I have before me such a revival of the first great apostasy in the heavenly courts that I am bowed down with an agony that cannot be expressed. Here's my point. This is the same story over again as Lucifer in heaven. We started off with Lucifer's rebellion, and we jumped down to Christ's response. The good Kellogg led to the beginning of the loud cry. And then, for a variety of reasons, he flipped the traces and became perhaps the greatest tool of the devil on earth at the time, which led to the alpha of apostasy. My basic premise is we can use these four events to help us understand the two that remain before us. And that's where we'll end for this one. I'm sorry, that's ridiculously long. Take a break, please. The mind cannot absorb what the seat cannot endure. I know that. Okay, for the last presentation here, talking about the Omega, which is the last letter of the alphabet, right? The end of times, the final tests, those kind of things all kind of clump together in the Omega. The good thing about the Omega, if there's a good thing, the good thing is there's nothing new. If we've learned from the past, there's really no reason to be surprised at what comes at the end of time. Let's see. Yes. Okay. Now, I just want to kind of lay out a thought that will be helpful along the way. So this is kind of a little bit separate from some other things, but I can't remember the reference. Somebody give me the Bible reference here. You know the verse.
Which verse?
The Lord is faithful, will not allow us to be tempted.
1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, I think.
10:13. There we go. That sounds right. I just can't always get that. Okay. He will not allow us to be tempted above what we are able to bear, but will with the temptation provide
A way of escape.
a way of escape. Is that not a blessed promise. Have you ever claimed that promise? I hope you have. If you haven't, you've been losing the battle or working far too hard on your own or something. I don't know. But you need to claim the promise. It's a great promise. Now here's a challenge to that promise, though. As we saw in our first meeting, the process of refuting Satan's claims and accusations involves Satan making a full demonstration of his principles. How can that be done if God is putting limits on Satan's work? Oh, man. If God says, no, can't do that, they can't bear that temptation, you can't use that. Satan, knock it off. You can't do that. You think that's going to go down well with Satan? It's like, this is not fair. Isn't it? You're trying to tell me that my ideas are no good and you won't even let me present them to them because these poor little babies, he can't deal with it. That's going to work? That's not going to work. God has to allow Satan to make his full case. But how does he do that and protect us?
He strengthens his people.
He strengthens his people.
Yeah, and then when the temptation comes, they can bear it.
Indeed. There's a statement to that effect. The followers of Christ know little of the plots which Satan and his hosts are forming against them. But he who sitteth in the heavens will overrule all these devices for the accomplishment of his deep designs. The Lord permits his people to be subjected to the fiery ordeal of temptation, not because he takes pleasure in their distress and affliction, but because this process is essential to their final victory. He could not, consistently with his own glory, shield them from temptation. For the very object of the trial is to prepare them to resist all the allurements of evil. So what happens to the promise that he will not allow us to be tempted above what we are able? He makes it so that we're able. Okay? Does that make sense? The devil has to be given free rein with all of his temptations. He has not yet been given free rein. We are not yet ready to bear those temptations. And so the Lord is, I think, I want to say this in a sort of an allegorical, figurative way. Don't try to make this doctrinal, okay? But in the process of saving his people, all through the ages, God has had to say, no, stay, no, can't do that. Stop her there. Thus far and no further. And Satan says, you're interfering, God. This is not fair. You're interfering. You are, what's the word? You are defiling the whole process of the court case. And in a sort of an allegorical, comparative sense, don't, like I say, don't try to make this too doctrinal or anything. The measures that God has to take to protect his people along the way are defiling the very process of their salvation. Because they're leaving the devil with the charge. That ain't fair, that doesn't count. He never gave me the chance to test them. He never gave me the chance to use my principle. This is not a fair thing. But at the end of the time, the process of salvation itself has to be justified. It's kind of like, that's what I'm saying, don't make it a doctrine, right? It's kind of like the forgiveness of sins defiles the temple. But there comes a time when the temple must be cleansed. Satan has to be turned loose. We have some indications of things that might entail. Now, it speaks of miracles. I think I have the quote here. We'll come to it later on. She says, these miracles will bring Seventh-day Adventists to the test. Most of us have not seen logic-defying miracles. And been confronted with the test of, do I believe God or I believe what I see with my own eyes? And most of us, I don't think, have really been confronted with that. We will be. God's people will be. That's part of the process. This, one little thought I lost. I'm trying to recover now. But this process, oh, I know it is. There we go. It's an interesting thing in the services of the Day of Atonement. You know, there's sacrifices made other than, you know, there's the scapegoat and all that sort of stuff, but there's other sacrifices first, okay? And the whole temple is kind of purified, and sacrifices are made, blood is applied, and all this sort of thing before the whole process begins on the Day of Atonement. Among the objects that are purified from sin through the blood of the sacrificial victim at that time is the altar out in the courtyard, which represents the cross. How could the cross ever need to be purified? The cross is what purifies everything else. On the Day of Atonement, the cross itself, the sacrifice of Christ, has to be purified. And I'm going to suggest there's never anything wrong with the sacrifice of Christ, but God himself has been forced by our inability to bear the temptations of Satan to violate the whole structure of the legal test that's going on between him and Satan. And this is what's given Satan ammunition all this time. He says, but he won't ever let me. And it comes down to this. He could not consistently, with his own glory, shield them from temptation. For the very object of the trial is to prepare them to resist all the allurements of evil. Until the demonstration is made, the argument still hangs in the air. See what I'm saying? Does that make any sense? Okay, let's go. We have nothing to fear of the future, except that we shall forget the way the Lord has led us in his teaching in our past history. We quote that one all the time. That always bugs me, though, frankly, because I haven't been able to figure out yet what's the difference between forgetting and never learning it in the first place. I get a little worried. An awful lot of Adventists know almost nothing about their past. There's a lot of value there, and I think it would be a blessing to them. Well, going on. Satan deceives and corrupts the world and makes men believe that they are sinless and holy, while sinning against God. But in so doing, he is only carrying on his original work. He has introduced no new arguments. He has created no new empire of darkness from which to draw supplies for the furtherance of his deceptions. And sin that was sin in the beginning is sin today. And sin, the apostle declares, is the transgression of God's law. There's nothing new here. He has no new deceptions. If we learn the lessons from the past, we stand a chance of recognizing the deceptions when they come to us. In these days, it is, this is fascinating, see. In these days, it is Satan's determined purpose to intensify sin by making it legal in the children of disobedience. He is to reveal to the world and to heaven what is the order and result of a government carried on according to his ideas of administration and law. He is working with secret yet with intense zeal in both church and state to cause men to throw off all the restraints of God's law and take a decided stand with him in the ranks of rebellion. But when his work is accomplished, the Lord will interpose and vindicate his honor as the supreme ruler of the universe. Back up at the top. Intensify sin by making it legal. He's working in church and state. See anything being legalized? There's some strange things going on in some of the countries that I'm familiar with. Okay. Well, let's see. Let's go. I believe the Lord has given us a record of all this stuff in order to illustrate this stuff. And so this last stuff down at the bottom is where we want to look. I'm not the prophet. I'm not the son of a prophet. Can't claim direct inspiration on anything except what I can quote from somebody I know was directly inspired, okay? So I will tell you that I don't have all the answers on how things will look in the future, but that's where we want to look. What can we do? That's what we're trying to get. The important thing to remember is the closing events are just the full development of the things that we've seen before. There's nothing new. Okay? That's what. We have, we've heard this statement before, right? Christ's method alone will give true success. There's something interesting here. Notice the second word in that sentence. It's singular. It's not a bunch of methods. There's a method. So we're not talking about all the little distinctions that we might find. Well, he healed one guy by putting clay on his eyes, and he healed another guy by putting his hand on his eyes, and he healed another guy by... That's not the kind of level we're talking at, obviously, because there's multiples there, and we're talking a singular thing, right? Okay? This is the one big method, the one thing that stands out above all the others. We saw this primarily in our meeting this morning at 11 o'clock. The great object that brought Christ to the earth was to reveal the Father. This was the great truth, the object of Christ's mission, to reveal the Father. In all his ministry, all his self-denial, self-sacrifice, Christ's object was to reveal God to the world. This is the method. The revelation of the character of God. It's the only weapon that the Godhead has in the battle. But things are different now from when this was read. Yeah, some people right there. Back in the day when this is talking about, Jesus was here. He's not here anymore. Not in the same sense anyhow, right? So who's going to reveal the Father? The world today needs what it needed 1900 years ago, we could say 2,000 years ago now. It needs a revelation of Christ, who incidentally was a revelation of the Father. Allowing us to be sidetracked just briefly to address a current event issue. As we saw earlier, it's absolutely imperative that human beings have an understanding and a knowledge of the Father. And so Jesus was sent to reveal the Father. When Jesus left, he said, it's important for you to remember the things that I've taught and to understand even more truth out of it. And so the Holy Spirit was commissioned to bring all things to remembrance and to guide us into all truth. That much I know. I've never yet found anywhere where there is an imperative need for human beings to understand the work of the Holy Spirit, to understand the nature of the Holy Spirit, nor have I found anyone commissioned to explain the Holy Spirit. So I would just encourage you that when you find those who are bent on explaining in all levels of intricacy the work and purpose and nature of the Holy Spirit, I would encourage you to spend your time elsewhere. That's just my opinion. Hasn't been commissioned. Don't waste your time. Okay, that's fine. What the world needs today is the light of Christ's example reflected from the lives, the lives of Christ-like men and women. Okay, so basically here's the deal. Jesus did the work back 2,000 years ago, It's been given to us. It's been given to us. Hearts will be captivated not by the glory of the man, but by the inward adorning of an abiding Christ. It is the revelation of Christ in the man that captivates the hearts of men and women. They behold the beautiful character of Christ revealed by good works. Caleb was on to something back there in 1893 when he says good works are essential. God's purpose in committing to men and women the mission that he committed to Christ is to disentangle his followers from all worldly policy and to give them a work identical with the work that Christ did. Identical is a very strong word. What does it mean for us to carry on a work identical to the work that Christ did? The glory of the character of Christ can never be expressed in words. Human language is inadequate to reveal it. It must be made manifest in the life. It is to be manifest in the individual Christian, in the family, in the church, in the ministry of the Word, and in every institution established by God's people. It has to be shown. There's no telling that's going to do it. It has to be shown. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Christ, the great medical missionary, is our example. He healed the sick and preached the gospel in his service. Healing and teaching were linked closely together. Today, they are not to be separated. We have headed down a different road and wandered around in the wilderness a little bit on that issue for a century or so. We need to bring those things back together. The gospel of health, the gospel of spiritual salvation are like two sides of the same coin. Try and split it apart. It doesn't. Same word in Greek, remember? Sozo? Okay? The Holy Spirit never has and never will in the future divorce the medical missionary work from the gospel ministry. They cannot be divorced. Bound up with Jesus Christ, the ministry of the Word, and the healing of the sick are one. The union of Christ-like work for the body and Christ-like work for the soul is the true interpretation of the gospel. What is this word?
Singular.
It's the definite article. Right? We talked about that before. The car, not just a car, it's the car. This is the true interpretation of the gospel. Meaning that all others would be false. To some degree or another, they're false. They are at, maybe false is maybe that carries a kind of a too negative connotation, but they are at the very best insufficient. Maybe that's a nicer way of saying it. I don't mean to be, uncharitable. They're not going to do the job. Okay. Let's see. Let's go on. Okay, so we've been looking at these accusations. Okay, we still got 3 on the board. What's God going to do about them? Okay. Notice, Okay, so notice what they are, though. Basically, 7 and 8 are ones to focus on. 9, remember, just disappears when 7 and 8 are solved, right? Okay. So 7 is the arbitrary law, and the law makes forgiveness impossible. Aspect. Okay. Have you ever thought about that? You probably read that. You read Great Controversy. I'm sure you did read it. Lucifer says, "Thou canst not in justice, O God, forgive these people." You certainly can't forgive them and condemn me because we did the same thing. How could that be fair? 2 guys get caught, they're both doing 100 miles an hour in a 70-mile-an-hour zone.
That's only if you don't take into account risk.
how can you have mercy on one and not mercy on the other? I'm sorry, I'm distracted here. My father-in-law was hauled into the hospital in an ambulance this morning during the 11 o'clock service. And just wondering if that's a call for me or not. Apparently not. I think you're okay. Let's go ahead. Somebody must It's for me. Okay, right about that. Every time I go away, everything breaks apart in my mind. It's tough. Okay. So Lucifer's saying, you can't forgive them and condemn me. We did the same thing. That kind of forgiveness, God, that's not something you can say is not arbitrary. If you forgive them and condemn me, that proves your law is arbitrary. And if you prove the law is arbitrary, then I win. Huh? Right? And if your law is not arbitrary, then you can't forgive them. And if you do forgive them, you're changing your law. And this is his big argument, okay? He planned this before he tempted Adam and Eve to sin. You know that, yeah? He said, I don't have that quote here. He knew. He said, I know that God loves these people so much that if they sin, he will find a way to save them. And if he saves them, he has to change his law. And if he changes his law, I win the argument. And if I win the argument, then he's got to take me back. And God's going to win the argument without changing the law and still being perfectly just. It's a harder thing, that verse, can he be just and yet to justify, rather than to believe in him? Can he do both? Can he maintain his law and still forgive? This is the big question that the devil has gambled his entire life and existence and his whole rebellion on. That's what we come down to. Okay, well, look at a couple of statements. In the character of God's people, a living testimony will be born that will contradict the fallacy of Satan, who has declared that the law of Jehovah is arbitrary and holds its subjects under a cruel bondage. Where does question 7 get refuted? God's people. That's why it's still there. Because we have not collectively, and that's not to shift the blame to you, I have not, in any sense, provided that demonstration yet. Probably you have neither, I'm guessing, no offense. We've got some work to do. This is where it's going, because we've got to resolve that accusation. The Lord desires for his people to answer Satan's charges by showing the results of obedience to right principles. Okay, so let's do a little summary on God's work at the end of time here. God's final work uses the same method that Christ used during his life on earth, the revelation of the character of God. God's final work requires that human beings take up the same manner of work that Jesus practiced during his life on earth. And identical work, he said. Okay? The revelation of God's character cannot be accomplished through words alone. Acts of mercy and healing are also necessary. So it's this combined work, the union of Christ-like work for the body, Christ-like work for the soul, the true interpretation of the gospel. In short, God's final work is self-sacrifice and self-denial exemplified in what we could broadly refer to as medical mission. Good deeds. Good works. Okay? Doesn't have to be medical. You don't have to have a doctor's degree or any of that sort of stuff. If you do, praise the Lord, use it. Right? Some people, some of us get 1 talent, and some people get 10 talents. And if you got 10 talents, use them. Obviously, use them. Okay? For all they're worth, use them. The truth for this time, the third angel's message, is to be proclaimed with a loud voice, meaning with increasing power, as we approach the great final test. This test, the great final test, must come to the churches in connection with the true. Now, if you've not heard this statement before, if you're not familiar with it, I want you to think for a second. What do Seventh-day Adventists say? How would we fill that in? Okay, the great final test comes to the churches in connection with the true Sabbath, right? You would kind of think that, the whole Sunday law thing, yeah? It does. the true character of God, that's probably a pretty good answer too, okay? It's not exactly the way she worded it this time, however. This time, she said, it must come in connection with the true medical missionary work. A work that has the great physician to dictate and preside in all it comprehends, which is how and why it reflects the character of God, which includes the Sabbath. But it's this union of Christ-like work through body, Christ-like work through soul. Okay, well, most obvious problem in the Alpha was pantheism, the belief that God is not a specific person, but some sort of all-pervading non-entity. All men, saints and sinners alike, became at least partially divine, because God was everywhere, and the heavenly sanctuary became wherever God is, hence the name Living Temple. So, Elder Spicer and I think it was George Amadon had an interview with Dr. Kellogg in 1907, shortly before his disfellowship. And in the process, there's this famous little exchange. He said, well, what do you believe about the heavenly sanctuary? What do you believe about the sanctuary service? And Dr. Kellogg said, the sanctuary is wherever God is. Thump, 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 tap, 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 okay? And God is in the living temple, right? Okay. Beyond the philosophical elements, there were also clear indications of direct supernatural involvement. We read this before when you wrote that book. Satan was helping him, right? It is not John Kellogg that you are dealing with. It is a being who once figured in the courts of heaven as an exalted angel. The poor doctor is not in his right mind. Effectively, we could say he was possessed. It is Satan's theories that are now coming to the front from the lips of Dr. Kellogg. Now, I don't understand, I'm just going to tell you, I don't understand the mechanics of possession, right? It's kind of easy to think of it as the person's individual personality is like completely erased or totally overridden. And yet it doesn't seem to be. You know, Zarvages talks about the demoniac who came into the synagogue, you know, and all he could utter were curses, but Ellen White says that, you know, he was trying to plead for help. You know? And so there is some element of individual consciousness, whatever. It's not like he become a remotely controlled robot or something like that. So it's really interesting, because Ellen White could be making these strong statements. He's not in his right mind. He's being controlled by the devil. And yet she would still write him letters, pleading with him, trying to, what should I say, invigorate his own will to choose, you know, to accept righteousness. Spiritual, okay, I'm going to say something on this first. Adventists, seems to me, have sometimes narrowed the idea of spiritualism down too much. We fail to grasp the breadth of it. We tend to focus on the Aunt Margaret coming back from the dead type of stories. Okay. And I don't mean to minimize those. I believe that, you know, yes, the devil does impersonate our loved ones, and things like that happen. One minor event of that in my mother's life, you know. So I know that sort of thing happens. But spiritualism itself is bigger than just the issue of the continued consciousness after death. Okay? And so it's kind of interesting. You'll find Ellen White writing about spiritualism, and she's warning. We can sometimes make a distinction. She writes about spiritism, which is the idea of spirits. Okay? She doesn't always use the terms I'm saying. I'm just making it, kind of applying these terms and categories. But then sometimes she'll write about spiritualism as a bigger thing in itself. And it's like it takes on a totally different tone. Okay? Notice this comment here on spiritualism. Spiritualism declares that there is no death. Okay, so that's where the spirit coming back from the dead type thing fits in, right? But it's much more than that. There is no sin, no judgment, no retribution, that men are unfallen demigods, that desire is the highest law, and that man is accountable only to himself. The barriers that God has erected to guard truth, purity, and reverence are broken down, and many are thus emboldened in sin. The idea that desire is the highest law has been reflected in a whole variety of ad campaigns of late. You can find that in various phrasings in all sorts of soft drink ads and, I don't know, tennis shoes, and I'm not sure what else. But here she doesn't say a thing about Aunt Margaret coming back from the dead. But this is spiritualism. This spiritualism asserting the spiritual status of unfallen demigods, that I'm accountable only to myself. I don't have to answer to God. There is no judgment. There is no retribution. I am independent. That's spiritualism. Perhaps the most basic thing to remember about Satan's end-time deceptions is that they're all counterfeit. He has to build on the real, right? Okay? The first thing that comes to mind when we talk about, Satan's going to counterfeit things to the end-time. The first thing we probably think of is this, right? As the crowning act in the great drama of deception, Satan himself will personate Christ. In different parts of the earth, Satan will manifest himself among men as a majestic being of dazzling brightness. Okay? The enemy of souls has sought to bring in the supposition that a great reformation was to take place among Seventh-day Adventists, and that this reformation would consist in giving up the doctrines which stand as the pillars of our faith and engaging in a process of reorganization. Were this reformation to take place, what would the result? So I'm going to suggest here that because I believe, the acorn oak tree relationship between the alpha and the omega, I'm going to suggest that what she says next here about where the alpha would have gone if it had been allowed to develop at that time is probably a pretty good indication of what the omega would look like at the end of it. Follow logic? You can have a different piece of logic if you wish, but that's just so you know that's what I'm saying. Okay? The statement goes on. The principles of truth that God in His wisdom has given to the remnant church would be discarded. Our religion would be changed. The fundamental principles that have sustained the work for the last 50 years would be accounted as error. A new organization would be established. That's an interesting one. What was the new organization that Kellogg and Company sought to establish? I think I found it in letters that Kellogg wrote. It never really got started, but there was an effort to establish a new organization. There was once that they said, we will give the Review and Herald 20 months to accept Living Temple. And if they don't, we will ramp up our efforts and we will make the Medical Missionary magazine the new Review and Herald, and then leave the people to decide which is the true church. Interesting thought. Going on. Books of a new order will be written. I like that one just because it's been so much fun. For 100 years now, every time something comes up that people don't like, that's a book of a new order. That was what's worked out so much it's almost meaningless now. And there's no question that it's happened, but it's just cute how it's been used. A system of intellectual philosophy would be introduced. Intellectual philosophy, interesting. The founders of the system would go into the cities and do a wonderful work. Well, in context, that would be illustrated by the work of the Chicago City Mission that Kellogg was running down in Chicago. And they were doing a great work. Great, at least in terms of size and magnitude, using up a lot of money in the process, which was imbalanced. The Sabbath, of course, would be lightly regarded, as also the God who created it. Nothing would be allowed to stand in the way of the new movement. There's some force brought to bear here. There's going to be some strong-arm tactics. The leaders would teach that virtue is better than vice. Well, thank you for that much. But God being removed, they would place their dependence on human power, which, without God, is worthless. Their foundation would be built on the sand and storm and tempest would sweep away the structure. I suspect that we can see some of the beginning stages of this development playing out in Adventism now. There are way too many church members heading down a pointless sort of a social gospel road. And that mindset is deadly, right? They want to be sort of virtuous, right? Because virtue is better than vice. But they stay a long way from being overly religious. Here's one potential example of this sort of thing. You probably can't read too much on this. Up here in the red box, it says Adventist Peace Fellowship. Okay? And down here is for the healing of the nations. We'll come to that in a little bit, so don't worry about it too much right now. The Adventist Peace Fellowship is one of a sisterhood of peace fellowships. I think there's 23 or some such number of sisterhoodish peace fellowships. There's an Adventist Peace Fellowship, and a Baptist Peace Fellowship, and a Catholic Peace Fellowship, and a Hindu Peace Fellowship, and a Buddhist Peace Fellowship, and somebody else, and somebody else, and somebody else Peace Fellowship. And they all share the same ideals. Is that him?
Yeah, there's actually a grove in Germany that all the denomination leaders have planted a tree to, so that all the roots will come together, and they're all kind of laid out in this symbolic garden, if you will, to unify all the world's religions. And the Adventists have placed a tree in that garden as well, which is kind of an unfortunate situation.
It is unfortunate. Just from my personal experience over there are serious challenges on the ecumenical front in Germany. It's a big issue over there.
What are they doing?
What are they doing? I believe this is a picture of something like a South African diamond mine or something. I think that's what that is, probably, I guess. Okay. So anyhow, the Peace Fellowships is inherently a rather ecumenical type of movement, organization type of thing. Now this block down here, you can't read it probably, so let me pop that up for you. This is what it says. It says that they believe in Sabbath economics. And as a result, they support debt relief for developing nations and a preferential option for the poor. Sabbath? I mean, excuse me? What are Sabbath economics? Yeah, this is the only mention of Sabbath on the Adventist Peace Fellowship website. Okay. And I suspect it's the only point in which they place any particular emphasis on Sabbath, right? In the statements, the Sabbath would be lightly regarded. Now notice this here. Their foundation would be built on the sand, and storm and tempest would sweep away the structure. What's that a reference to? Persecution. But the general... Which parable? The wise man built his house upon a rock. Right? Little kids still sing that song? Probably better than I do. Anyhow, yeah, this is the parable of the wise man and the foolish man, and the two houses. The foundation would be built on the sand, and storm and tempest would sweep away the structure. Now, here's the important thing. There were two houses, but there's only one storm. It's not like God said, oh, look, there's a wise man. I will send April showers so that he has May flowers. Oh, look, there's a foolish man. I will hit him with a Cat 5 hurricane. That's not the way it was. It was one storm, the same storm. And though there's nothing said about these two houses that would tell us that they looked, I mean, they might have looked like cookie-cutter houses out in suburbia. They might have looked exactly the same on the outside. The only difference we know is the foundation. And one storm, or one house, is swept away, and one house stands. And the difference is not because somebody said, that house needs to be destroyed and that house needs to be preserved. The difference is because one house is built properly. What do you think the storm and tempest might be? What would we call that? When is all this going to happen? Allow me to suggest, not dictate, I'm not inspired. I would suggest that she's talking about what in other places she refers to as the little time of trouble, in which various forms of trouble and chaos are increasing in the earth. It's not hard for me to think that it might happen. Could you imagine the possibility of a financial collapse? I do this thing back 8 years, or 7.5, or 9.5 years. Happened once before, and all the gurus on Wall Street are telling us it's going to be worse this time. Could you imagine the possibility of political disruption? Even in the United States, perhaps? Any chance that somebody might get so mad that they take it out on the other political party? Maybe. Can you imagine the possibility of international strife and conflict? Something like a nuclear warhead from North Korea, for instance? Even though they're proclaiming peace and safety right now, I don't know if you noticed that. They announced yesterday that they're going to end the Korean War. Oh, good. Happy for them. Could you imagine the possibility of some sort of a storm blowing up right now? Everything good out there? Sounds almost ominous. Okay. Can you imagine the possibility of the medical system being taken down? You know, do you have any nurses here? How do your metropolitan hospitals fare during flu season around here? Stuff. Yeah, stuff. We're talking regular flu. They're all maxed out. Imagine if you had a flu like the 1918 Spanish flu. 1918, 50% of the world's population contracted the flu. Those who contracted it, 10% died. That's 5% of the world's population. 50 to 60 million people died of that flu. Back in 2004, remember the H1N1? It never acquired the attribute for easy aerosol transmission, so it never took off. But it had the other attribute that makes it particularly deadly. You know, they've got the DNA, or the RNA, actually it's a flu virus, so it's RNA. They've got the RNA of the flu bug mapped out totally. They know every single sequence of those base pairs, okay? And what they know is that there are two very special points. One point controls whether or not it survives and is easily aerosol transmissible, which is to say if you sneeze, it hangs in the air and people get infected for the next 12 hours. The other point affects the temperature at which the virus is most active. Your normal flu virus, and I may be off on the figures, so don't quote me on the temperatures here precisely, but as I recall it, it's something like you are qualified to do tenfold more good as a missionary for God than if you were to go forth merely as a preacher of the word. I would advise young men and women to give heed to this matter. Perilous times are before us. The whole world will be involved in perplexity and distress. Disease of every kind will be upon the human family, and such ignorance as now prevails concerning the laws of health will result in great suffering and the loss of many lives that might be saved. Okay, so we all ought to become doctors, right? That might be a little tough for some of us, a little bit old to get into med school, you know. So what can we do, even if we're not going to be a doctor? I'm not knocking doctors. I pray for them. Going to med school is a pretty important situation too sometimes.